The crossing did not begin with a song. It began with the underside of a washboard no one had lifted in 145 years. The Uncrossed. Case File TX-004. Subject, Rusalka. The woman whose first name was kept beneath the underside of a washboard. For 145 years, the village warned children not to answer the river. But the river had not been calling them. It had been holding one name underneath a washboard. The crossing did not begin with a song. It began with the underside of a washboard no one had lifted in 145 years. In late June 2024, Seo Mun-ha walked into an Eastern Slavic river village following a single torn page from a parish lament book kept in a regional ethnographic archive beyond the river district. The page carried 4 words copied in a 1903 collector's hand. Drowned. No burial granted. The page did not carry a first name. It did not carry a date of death. It carried only the river the woman had entered and the form of the lament her mother was said to have sung at the abandoned wash place after sunset in the late summer of 1879. Mun-ha located the wash place on the second morning of her walking survey. She crossed the broken footbridge above the lower bank. She walked past the foundations of 2 collapsed bathhouses. She walked toward the long stone embankment at the river bend, where the women of an Eastern Slavic peasant household in this region had washed for at least 3 generations before the year of the woman's disappearance. She found 4 old washboards still partly set into the silt at the embankment's edge. The boards had not been turned over. Beneath the second board from the river side, set into the muddy underside that faced into the current, were 2 things. A folded square of hand-woven flax linen, preserved by the cold of the river's silt and by the constant current that had passed over it without disturbing it. A single line of red thread, faded almost to brown, embroidered along the inner fold of the cloth, cut deep enough to survive 145 years of water and silence, in a hand that Mun-ha would later identify as a Cyrillic capital letter. The villagers of the surrounding river country had not feared the river. They had feared the underside of the wash place. The wash place had 2 sides. The village had washed above one of them. The first letter of a name had waited beneath the other. The Uncrossed. Case File TX-004. Subject, an unnamed young woman of an Eastern Slavic river village, attributed by the surrounding villages to the Rusalka folkloric category. Field Investigator, Seo Mun-ha. Field Investigator of Unfinished Crossings. Date of recovery, June 2024. The washboards beside the river had not been turned over since the year the woman drowned. The current had passed them. No hands had reached the underside. The village survived. Most of it. A handful of older households remained along the river road, their gardens overgrown but their fences kept, their wells still drawn from. Mun-ha conducted her arrival interviews on the 3rd and 4th mornings of her field period, in the kitchens of 3 women in their 70s and 1 man in his 80s, all of whom had grown up in the village in the 1950s and had heard the river story from grandparents who had been small children in 1879. They knew the warning very well. They could repeat the warning's exact form. After dusk, do not walk near the wash place. After dusk, do not answer if a voice from beneath the river calls your name. After dusk, do not let small children near the embankment alone. The warning was preserved in the same words across all 4 interviews. The warning was textual. The warning had survived. What had not survived, in any of the 4 interviews, was the woman herself. The elders did not know the name. They did not know the family. They did not know what year the death had taken place. They did not know whether the woman had been a daughter of the village or a young wife brought in from elsewhere. One of the elders, the oldest woman, paused for a long moment when Mun-ha asked the question directly, then said quietly that her own grandmother had once told her that the river girl had been someone's neighbor's cousin, but that her grandmother had never spoken the name aloud and had always changed the subject when asked. The folkloric category had remained intact for 145 years. The biography behind the folkloric category had been allowed to die within 2 generations. When Mun-ha asked the oldest woman whether she remembered the first name, the elder woman set her teacup down without finishing it. She said the village had agreed, 3 generations earlier, not to ask for that name. She did not say who had agreed, or with whom. She said the agreement had been kept. Mun-ha noted the asymmetry in her field log. The legend was load-bearing. The woman was not. The village had decided, very early and very efficiently, which of the 2 would be remembered. The river village had 3 thresholds, and the woman of 1879 had crossed none of them fully. The first was the riverbank itself. The river accepted bodies in the practical sense. Bodies that entered the river at the deep bend below the village were almost never recovered, because the current at that bend ran below an undercut shelf of clay where flotsam collected and stayed. The river had taken the woman in this practical sense. The river had not refused her. The second threshold was the wash place. The wash place was not the river. The wash place was a women's space, a stone embankment with cut steps and 4 set washboards, used for laundry and for the slow daily ritual of village women's conversation. The wash place held what the women said to one another about the deaths and disappearances and pregnancies that the parish ledger and the elders' council did not formally record. The wash place was an oral archive. The wash place had held the woman's name for at least 1 generation, possibly 2, before the warning replaced it. The third threshold was the cemetery path. The cemetery sat above the village on the hill behind the church. The cemetery accepted only the properly mourned, those for whom the priest had performed the burial rite, those for whom the parish ledger had recorded the cause of death, those for whom the family had paid the small fee for the grave and the marker. The woman had not crossed any of these 3 thresholds completely. She had entered the river but not in mourning. She had been spoken of at the wash place but not recorded. She had not been admitted to the cemetery path at all. She had died at the edge of the village's organization of death, and the village had quietly decided that the edge was where she would remain. Before the warning, before the parish refusal, before the broken promise, she had been a young woman who walked to the wash place before sunrise, before the other women arrived, because the river was the only place where no one yet asked her to explain herself. The administrative refusal was performed in stages, and none of the stages required cruelty. They required only the absence of repair. She had been promised marriage in the late spring of that year. The man's family, by all 4 oral accounts collected by Mun-ha, was a small landholding household on the far side of the river, 2 villages downstream. The promise had been public enough that the woman's mother had accepted the customary first gifts. By the early summer, the woman was visibly pregnant. By the high summer, the man's household had withdrawn the promise without formal explanation. The woman's family did not press the matter. To press the matter would have required entering a public dispute that the family was unlikely to win, and that would have left 2 unmarried younger sisters in the household marked by association. The family withdrew into household silence. The parish, when the woman drowned in the late summer, refused burial under consecrated ground on the procedural grounds that the death had taken place at the river without witnesses, and that the cause of death could not be ruled non-suicidal. The parish ledger entry for that year carried no mention of the woman by name. The man's household entered no statement. There was no villain in the chain. There was, in each of the 3 administrations that touched her case, family, parish, the man's household, only a slight, polite withdrawal of recorded responsibility. 3 withdrawals are not yet a cover-up. 3 withdrawals, performed in the same summer, are an outcome. By the autumn, no administrative record in the village or the surrounding parishes carried her first name in connection with her death. The withdrawal was complete. It had been done without any single person having to do it. Years later, perhaps as early as the summer of 1881, perhaps as late as the summer of 1885, the warning began. The warning was directed at children. Do not walk near the wash place after dark. Do not answer if a voice from beneath the river calls your name. The voice was named once, by someone, in a phrase that became the warning's permanent form. A Rusalka. The Rusalka folkloric category was already deeply established in the wider Eastern Slavic countryside in the late 19th century. Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, and Polish village traditions all preserved versions of the unmarried dead young woman river spirit, sometimes singing, sometimes calling, sometimes capable of drawing the unwary into the water. The category was, in this specific village, a true folkloric inheritance. It was also, in this specific village, in this specific decade, the public language placeholder for what the family and the parish and the man's household had not been willing to record. Once the warning took hold, the woman no longer needed to be remembered as a person. She had been a daughter, briefly. She had been a betrothed, more briefly. She had been a mother, by anatomy, never administratively. She had been a young woman with a recorded first name and a recorded village address in a parish baptismal register, that record now misplaced. The category replaced all of these. Unmarried dead girl. Water spirit. Dangerous caller of children. The category was simpler. The category did not require the village to remember what had been done to her. The category remembered for them. A category became her second grave. First, she was a daughter. Then, a shame. Then, a body the cemetery would not take. Then, a warning. Then, a Rusalka. The village had never been afraid of the dead girl. It had been afraid that someone would ask why she had no grave. Mun-ha returned to the wash place on the 7th morning of her field period, in the early hour before the village was fully awake, and conducted the slow physical survey she had postponed until she was certain she was looking for something specific. She used a thin steel field probe to test the silt around each of the 4 old washboards still partly set into the embankment. The first board moved under the probe in the way a board moves when nothing has been placed beneath it. The third and fourth boards moved similarly. The second board, the one closest to the river side of the embankment, did not move under the probe. The probe encountered something soft and folded against the underside of the board, held against the board by the constant pressure of the current that had passed across the river silt for 145 years. The elder woman, who had not spoken for several minutes while Mun-ha worked the probe along the silt edge, set her hand on the second board and said quietly, in the older village register, "I knew this board." She did not say how. She did not say from whom. She said only that her grandmother had once told her never to wash above the second board, and that she had never asked why. Mun-ha removed the board with a small field shovel and the help of the elder woman from the third interview, who had walked down to the river that morning specifically because she had decided overnight that she wished to be present for whatever Mun-ha found. Beneath the board, folded into a square small enough to fit under the inside corner of the board against the current, was a piece of hand-woven flax linen, river darkened to the color of wet bark. The cloth was not decorative. It was not a household item. It had been folded and placed deliberately, by a hand that knew what it was placing, in a position where the river would preserve it and where no one washing above the board would ever lift the board to look beneath. The wash place had 2 sides. The village had washed above one of them. The folded cloth had waited beneath the other. The cloth was unfolded that evening at the elder woman's kitchen table under the slow yellow light of a single overhead bulb. The flax linen was 8 inches square at full extent, hemmed by hand on all 4 sides, and embroidered along the inner fold in 3 lines of red thread now faded to a deep iron brown. The red thread was hand-spun. The hemming was the work of a practiced household needle. The cloth had been made by someone who knew how to make cloth, and the embroidery had been done by someone who knew how to embroider, and both of these were almost certainly the same person, working over a period of weeks in a household where she could not be seen working on it. The first line of embroidery carried a single first name in the Cyrillic alphabet of the late 19th century. The first name was a common Eastern Slavic woman's name of the period. The second line carried a single first name and a single household name in a different hand, the hand of the same embroiderer but written with the slow, careful pressure of a person writing a name she did not wish to write. The household name was the name of a small landholding household 2 villages downstream. The third line carried 4 words. The child was his. The cloth was not a legal document. It was not a parish record. It was not a court statement. It was a witness made by someone who could not become a witness in any administrative space available to her in the late summer of 1879. Mun-ha photographed the cloth, recorded its measurements, recorded the elder woman's testimony of recognition. The elder woman did not recognize the first name, but recognized the household name and recognized the form of the embroidery as a form her own grandmother had practiced, and did nothing else with the cloth that night. The cloth had survived for 145 years on the underside of a washboard because someone, in the late summer of 1879, had decided that no administration was going to be allowed to be the only record of what had happened. Mun-ha did not write the name immediately. For several seconds, she only looked at the cloth, because the first name had survived more faithfully than any witness had. Before reading the name aloud the next evening, she would check the embroidery 3 times. Not because she doubted it. Because a name erased once should not be misread the second time. She was not born a Rusalka. She was made into one. That evening, after the elder woman had walked back to her own kitchen for the night, Mun-ha returned to the wash place alone. She brought the cloth, refolded along its original creases. She brought a small lantern. She did not bring an exorcism rite, or a prayer book, or any object intended to compel a spirit to depart. She had not come to remove the woman from the river. She had come to read the woman's name above the river in the language and form in which a hand in 1879 had embroidered it onto the inner fold of a piece of hand-woven flax linen and folded it under a washboard. Mun-ha stood at the embankment. She held the cloth open along its inner fold. She read the first line of embroidery aloud. She read the first name as it survived on the cloth, in the Cyrillic alphabet of the late 19th century, in the order in which the embroiderer had stitched it. She read the second line, the household name and the man's first name. She read the third line, the 4 words. She did not read them as accusation. She did not read them as ritual. She read them as the only witness the woman had ever been allowed. Nothing rose from the water. No apparition appeared. No voice answered from beneath the surface. The wind that had been moving across the river surface for the entire field period went still. The river surface lost the small restless tremor that local accounts had described for 145 years. The crossing was not spectacular. It was quieter than that. An unrecorded name had finally been admitted into the only record that had ever wanted to hold it. The next morning, the elders said the psalm was gone. Mun-ha recorded something different in her field log. Not disappearance. Not exorcism. Release. The river did not return her body. It released her name. Cross-reference. The uncrossed files document occult cases of spirits, grief, and identity that did not complete their crossing. TX-004 follows the 1879 disappearance of a young woman from an Eastern Slavic river village whose first name was preserved by no administrative record in the village or the surrounding parishes, but whose hand-embroidered name on the inner fold of a flax linen cloth folded beneath a washboard was preserved by the constant pressure of the river current for 145 years. The Morrisane cantatas of TX-003 had kept a name on the inner face of a stone above a well. The Rusalka of TX-004 had kept a name on the inner fold of a cloth beneath the underside of a washboard. The 2 cases share a structural form, a folkloric category applied to a woman whose individual name had been refused by the administrations available to her, and a piece of household material, stone, cloth, preserved across centuries on its underside. Mun-ha continues to read what the underside has carried. End of file.